What's up, everybody? It's Dr. Laura Pence here with Understanding Your Greatest Self. If you're just tuning in and you've been watching some other episodes and you're noticing some new background, it's because I've moved. Yay! I've moved from Texas to Colorado. Go Colorado. And I no longer have an office, so we're filming from home today, all right? So we are talking about trust. In our last episode, we talked about why trust is important, and really the exercise of the week was to get you thinking about why trust matters to you and what are the key elements of trust that are important to you, right? Today we're gonna talk a little bit about what happens and how can trust become fractured, right? And what is the result in a relationship? So when I think about the fractures of trust, or when I think about how trust can be fractured, I guess there's three main ways that I like to think about, okay? So the first is a breach of confidentiality. Now, that's like the formal term, right? But basically, it's like when you tell somebody something and then they go and they tell somebody else, when you told them in that safe container of the relationship, right? So that immediately begins to fracture trust, because when somebody is sharing something that's important to you, right? First of all, it's not your story to tell, to go and run to tell somebody else. But second of all, it means something to that person if they're sharing something with you, right? And it's a demonstration that they trust that you can hold what they're saying safe. You can engage in empathy, or maybe you can engage in advice giving, but you're not going to take that information outside of that relationship. And when you do, that trust becomes fractured, right? So that's one way in which trust can be fractured. The second way is you don't do what you say you're going to do, right? Reliability is a key element of trust. It certainly in my own life, but also in the research and data that we have about trust and its definition. So reliability basically means, right, you follow through. You do what you say you're going to do. But when you don't do that, the individual on the other end begins to question how trustworthy you can be, right? Whether or not you can follow through, whether or not you can do the things that you demonstrate or that you say that you're going to. Again, a big fracture in trust. And the third way that trust can be broken is when you cross boundaries, right? So when you cross over the line between what's okay and what's not okay. That crossing of boundaries begins to break down that level of trust because the individual doesn't feel safe anymore. Maybe you're crossing emotional boundaries and they don't feel safe with you emotionally. Maybe you're crossing physical or sexual boundaries and they don't feel physically safe with you or sexually safe with you. Maybe you're crossing financial boundaries, right? Maybe if you're married to someone and you start dipping into their bank account, you're crossing a boundary there, and that person begins to not feel like they can trust you, and it erodes in the relationship, okay? So again, those are three ways that trust can be fractured. Now, what happens when the trust is fractured? Well, in the most simplest terms, the relationship begins to break down, right? There are sort of poisonous seeds that are planted, and if they are not addressed, then the relationship begins to be defined by having cracks in it. Now, we are human and we are fallible and we make mistakes. So there are going to be times in relationships where you break trust. That does not mean that the relationship will forever be broken. You can circle back and communicate about that trust and talk about that trust. But you have to do that in order to heal. You cannot deny and ignore that it happened and not address it and hope that the relationship will be the same. It won't. You have to circle back and address it. But it's really important to just even understand that those three simple things, right? So telling secrets or breaking the confidentiality, not being reliable, and crossing boundaries can create fractures in the trust system of a relationship, okay? So your key question of the week is to ask yourself, where have you engaged in one of those three things and broken trust in a relationship? And when have you been on the receiving end of that, right? Maybe just do some journaling about it or some writing about it so that you can put some pen to paper a little bit and explore that a little bit more, okay? But that's your key question of the week. All right, so come back in our next episode. We're going to talk a little bit about the roles that you play in certain relationships. That's all I got for you today. Hit that subscribe button, click on that like, those thumbs, come back each week. I'll see you next time. All right, so come back in our next episode. I have no idea what I'm talking about.